All right, Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Bahashim, Racha HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth and rule well. Peace and blessings unto the hopeful elect, pushing his word throughout the four corners of the earth in truth, righteousness, and sincerity. To you I say Shalom. This is the brother Yeshaya coming at you again through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Back again with another lesson. And this one is going to be entitled, Don't Let Your Thoughts Get the Best of You, right? Don't let your thoughts get the best of you, right? Especially coming in a time period where your mind, when your mind is being infiltrated, through all these fear tactics that Esau's using, these, um, all this media, all this social media and all this different forms of, witchcraft and enchantments that's being pumped out there to try to have you to, you know, trust in, carnal aspects, in lot of life, carnal, like carnality, pretty much, instead of trusting in the Lord, because that's always that's being pushed, for you to rely and depend on the flesh, you know, to keep on pushing this, mindset of being depraved, this mindset of um, how should I say it? Pretty much, what are we gonna do, right? This mindset of um, uh, pretty much being without, right? Really, when you give your mind over to those thoughts, that's when doubt starts to set in. That's when, you know, evil, tries to infiltrate your mind. Really, Satan tries to infiltrate your mind, right? But if you stay locked into this truth, if you continue in pretty much fighting the good fight of faith, right? As a matter of fact, let's get that. First Timothy 6 and verse 12, it says, fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. Right. So the point being is, you gotta continue to fight. Right. This fight is a spiritual fight, because when you go into what is it, Ephesians 6 and 12, it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. You see, so this is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual fight, right? A fight for your soul. It ain't no physical battle. Now, that's not to say that the fight won't get physical, right? Because it will. It'll come to a point where, pursuant to Revelation 12 and 12, where pretty much Esau, the wicked, will come down upon the whole world having great wrath, right? So he's going to unleash wrath upon the world. And it's going to be a form of him physically coming after you, right? Persecution, right? Torture, death, whatever it might be. But leading up to that, we understand this is a spiritual battle, one that's aimed at taking your mind, one that is aimed at making you rely on the flesh, not rely on the spirit, right? Not relying on Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. That's what Esau's ultimate goal is to do, right? That's why he has agents out there, you know, whether it's these other camps, whether it's um, false Christ or these Christians, which they're all anti-Hamashiach anyway, because they don't believe in the true gospel. But the point being is that he has people out there that are set in place to deviate uh, um, people out of the path. Because Esau's ultimate goal is to um, lay hands on the elect, right? The faithful, the true believers, right? We understand that some of these guys are going to end up taking a lot of our people, right? but that's only the 2/3. The elect, they're going to receive the truth, right? And they're going to be grafted into this word, grafted back in, you know. But once you are grafted in, once you have this truth, and once you have this faith, our job is to continue to fight, right? Hold on to the peace that we have, because, like I said, Esau's out here to try to, you know, remove us out the way spiritually, right? He don't want us to come back to the wisdom, knowledge, understanding of the scriptures. He don't want us to come back to our heritage. He don't want us to come back to remembrance, right? This is the reason when you read in 1 Peter 5 in verse 8, it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." You see? So you gotta be sober. You gotta be vigilant, sober-minded, meaning you gotta pretty much stay holy, keep your eyes single, pretty much, right? Stay focused on the kingdom of heaven. Stay focused on the truth, right? It says be vigilant, right? You gotta keep your head on a swivel, man. You gotta be circumspect. We can't be careless out here in the world, you know, because now that um you came into this truth, now that your eyes have been opened, now Satan has his eye fixed on you. Now you're a target. You made yourself a target, right? When you read in Sirach, the 2nd chapter, right? The first verse, it says, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation." So as soon as you come and serve the Lord, best believe Satan, is making moves on you already, right? But it says, "Because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." And that's talking about, the physical counterpart of Satan, which is Esau, the so-called white man. Has traps and snares laid out in this world, you know, to try to steer you away from the truth. But not even just that, he also has a trap set up to get you locked up, you know what I'm saying? Various things. And as a matter of fact, when you go into Luke 22, because like we mentioned, this is a spiritual thing. This is them trying to infiltrate your mind. You know what I'm saying? And in a world full of evil, it's harder to find some place of refuge, some place of tranquility and peace, right? And that's what he tries to attack. He tries to attack your peace, and at the same time, pumping all this nonsense through his television, right, or through your phones, whatever. Which are all the same thing. They're all black mirrors, but through that, he's putting seeds in your mind to steer you away from the truth, putting in seeds of doubt, right? Seeds of hopelessness, seeds of being faithless, right? But that shouldn't sway you. You know what I'm saying? This is why, as apostles and elders always say, you got to be constantly doing the work. You got to be constantly, reading, studying. You got to remain in the truth, man. Because there's so much shit out here that's trying to steer you away. You got to counterbalance that, right? So if you go a long period of time without reading, without studying, without doing your videos, you know what I'm saying, it becomes harder, you know what I'm saying, to come back and lock in. But let me read this. Luke 22 and verse 31, it says, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to sift, Slakia, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat." You see? Now, I want to get this real quick in the interlinear, right? The word for sift, we always bring it out, but it's a major point, right? It says to sift, it says shake and a sieve, figuratively by inward agitation to try one's faith on the verge of overthrow. See, so he's trying to overthrow your faith. He's trying to steer you in the wrong direction, right? Make you believe that this ain't the truth. Make you believe that you ain't part of the elect. Make you believe, you know, these thoughts that can ultimately overthrow you, right? Ultimately break you and make you go down, the other path, right? Because when you read Matthew, the 7th chapter, Yahushua talks about, there are two paths, man. You have the straight gate and you have the broad. Right now, you're going through different adversities, you're going through all this hell, but that's the straight gate. That's the what you call the rite of passage in order to attain the kingdom of heaven. But Esau is trying to pull you down to the broad gate, to the broad path, telling you, "Oh, look, it's easy. You'll live better. You'll have more friends. You'll have, your family will love you. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Blase, blase, blase. All these things. He's gonna try to come with to try to pull you away from the truth, right? He'll it'll be like when Satan tempted Yahushua, right? Now, of course, we all go through our different, struggles, so at the time that we're struggling, that's the reason why the scripture tell us, man, whenever we do go through different adversity, to be patient, right? As a matter of fact, how does it go? Be patient when thou art brought to a low state. Bear with me. I'm trying to find this real quick. I hate this shit. Right here. Sirach 2 and verse 4, it says, whatever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state, right? So if you're going through, whatever hell it is you're going through, you're being put low, you got to be patient with that. You can't be, you can't act in haste and try to get out of that situation, through carnal means, you know. And what I mean by that is, you're in a situation, you're in a maybe a financial situation, and people start coming to you, or you know of ways to try to get out of it, but it's wicked. You know what I'm saying? Then you shouldn't do it. The rest of the world, those who don't have the truth, they operate in that fashion to where they operate in haste. They do this get rich quick schemes, or fast money, or what I'm saying, to try to do things in a way to where it's against the laws of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and they end up getting jacked up. They end up being in a worse position than what they originally were, right? Which is why the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the scriptures is vital, right? For life, for longevity, right? The ways of the wicked is it might, seem, like it's beneficial for that short period of time, but at the end, that there's a tab that's due, right? And Yahweh Shai's collecting. Okay. Now again, let me go back. Where was I anyway? I think I was over here. Bear with me. Right. So going back, right, Luke 22 and 31, it says, and the Lord says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to sift you, or desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. You see? Now, as we said, as we read into it, sift means, as a matter of fact, let me read it again. Let's see, where's it at? Right here. It says figuratively by inward agitation to try one's faith to the verge of overthrow, right? To try one's faith to the verge of overthrow, right? So Satan is constantly active, whether it's a spiritual demon Satan, whether it's, those different demons under him, or whether it's Esau, right? They're constantly working to try to overthrow you, to try to make you feel weak, try to make you feel helpless, right? But that's why the truth is here to comfort you. That's why the scriptures call it the Comforter, right? The Holy Spirit has been granted down to comfort us in these in this world, in this evil, wicked ass world, man. This truth has been given unto us to give us faith, give us hope, right? That we're not always going to be in this condition, right? That something better is coming, but we're going to have to go through this hell in order to, as the scriptures talk about, going from glory to glory. We're going to have to go through this period of, being in this lower state, you know what I'm saying? Being tried, to ultimately be refined to that um, better, pile of gold, right? That refined pile of gold or refined silver, you know what I'm saying? So that way, the Most High can be directly dealing with us. And we're about to move to that glory here soon, man. When Yahushua returns, we're about to be, elevated to a whole nother level, man. Right? But all we gotta do is hang on. All we gotta do is continue to keep our mind and our spirit in check. Right? Hold on to that faith. Fight the good fight of faith, as we read. Right? This is why, again, we shouldn't be leaning upon the flesh. We shouldn't be leaning um upon our own thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts can be wrong. And I had this earlier, Jeremiah 17 and verse 19. No, verse 9. Salakia. It says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? You see? So you got to filter your thoughts through the scriptures. And like I said, Esau has so much infiltration going on, to try to steer you away from the path of righteousness, right? And even then, we can't keep, the law, statutes, and commandments, perfect. But Esau tries to play off of that. Esau will try, or even the spiritual demon Satan will try to play off of any crack or chink in your armor, right? Which is why we gotta constantly be on point. We gotta constantly be on guard, man. Like I said, this is a spiritual battle, right? And if you let Satan, get through the them cracks in your armor, you know what I'm saying? Then that's it can be a deadly blow. It can be, right? It all depends on how much strength and faith you got. Well, strength is the spiritual equivalence to faith, right? But reading this back, Jeremiah 17 and 9, the heart is deceitful above all things. See, the heart is deceitful. Sometimes you might be thinking a thought, and it'll sound just like you. It'll sound like it's coming straight from you. But it be Satan. And even then, you shouldn't be leaning upon your own understanding. As a matter of fact, um, Proverbs 3 in verse 5, it says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. You see? You can't lean on your own, vain imagination and your own weak understanding, right? Like I said, you got to filter everything through the scriptures. If it don't align with the scriptures, as I say, if it don't apply, let it fly, right? Verse 6, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. You see? In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Right? Always think about, as I say in the world, what would Jesus do? But really, you should phrase it as, what would Yahweh Shah do? In any situation you find yourself in, think about what Yahweh Shah would do, right? And apply that. Okay? Let's see. Because, whenever Yahweh Shah was on the scene, and you know what happened whenever he was baptized by John the Baptist, there was a light that came upon him, right? And it was, of course, the Most High that was speaking and saying, this is my son Yahweh Shah, on whom I am greatly pleased, right? So everything that Yahweh Shah did pleased the Lord, man. Yahweh Shah is that trailblazer. Yahweh Shah is that role model. He led by example, so we should be following in his footsteps. You see? Let me see. What else is I gonna get? Oh, let's get this. Cause I got it. Well, actually, Slacky, I already got that one. I was thinking about getting 1 Peter 5:8. Um, damn. As a matter of fact, let's get Wisdom of Solomon. What was it? Wisdom of Solomon 17, and I believe it's verse 12. Right. Yep. It says, "For fear is nothing else but a betraying of the succors which reason offereth, and the expectation from within, being less, counteth the ignorance more than the cause which bringeth the torment." You see, so by you, being in a state of fear, being fearful, because like I said, Esau is going to come with them fear tactics. What you, lack of water, lack of food, lack of security. I'm saying, violence. You know, uh, uh, even with the whole thing with the World War III draft, right? Esau is pumping fear to the masses, right? Having people crash out, having people, move in a way that's not wise, right? So it says, reading it back, verse 13, and the expectation from within being less, right? So, in whatever situation that you're pretty much faced with, you don't know the outcome of it, right? You don't know the outcome of it. So it's almost like they say, the fear of the unknown, right? So just because you don't know what's going to happen, you're over here thinking the worst, right? It says, counteth the ignorance more than the cause which bringeth the torment. So you're so more worried about you being ignorant of what is going to happen than actually what does happen. What ends up whatever ends up happening ends up not becoming that bad, So it becomes like a torment in your mind, right? Where I remember reading up on this, how some of these people that would go through different tortures, how they pretty much would almost anticipate the torture, or pretty much desire death, um, right before anticipating the torture, because that torment of that torment that's going through their mind um was pretty much unbearable, right? To where they were just like, just get on with it, man. Just kill me already, right? That's ultimately, the level of fear that's gonna be in the minds of a lot of these people, to where they're just gonna crash out, man. People are gonna start committing suicide, you name it, right? So it's gonna get bad. But but us over here, hey, we got the truth, man. We got hope. We got the the foundation that's gonna keep us stable, right? Scriptures go into, them that built, or those that built their foundation upon the rock, and those that built their foundation upon sand, right? What's more stable? right? Of course, is the rock. So our foundation is going to be like that hard rock that's going to be able to withstand them waves, right? The wind, that boisterous wind, right? Them tsunamis, right? Now let me get this. Um, Isaiah 33 in verse 6, it says, "And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure." You see, so this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that we got, that we received, is what's going to give us that stability going in through these times where, yeah, brothers think about, what we might go through, but we don't really meditate on it that much because we understand that the Most High is going to take care of us. He's going to preserve us through all that. Like I said, your faith is going to have to triumph over your fears, right? That's why the scriptures tell us, fear not what man can do, right? But fear him that had power, roughly paraphrasing, power over your soul, right? And can, as a matter of fact, let me get it. I don't want to mess it up. Um, Bear with me. Right here, Matthew 10 and 28. "And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." You see, which is the Lord. You should fear the Lord above any man. You shouldn't fear Esau, right? Because Esau, he can kill your body, but after that, there's nothing else he can do. He has no power over the spirit, right? And understanding that, and really, when you look at the scriptures, you know, um, the Most High raised up, certain men after death, primarily Yahushua. He's about to get his payback, right? He rose up the Apostle Paul, right? Um, I forgot who else, but the point being is that the Most High, can deliver us out of any situation that we go through, right? So being fearful over death, should be something, of course, is a natural thing to be fearful of that because we don't want to die. But again, our faith has to be able to overcome that when the time, if the time does come, right? Now let me see. But again, just going back to the point, how this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that we have is what's going to allow us to overcome those fears, right? Our faith is going to allow us to overcome those fears, and it's going to keep us stable, not panic, be in that panicky mood, or panicky state of mind to where we're going to act in haste and act in a panicked, unwise manner, and to try to escape from whatever evil that we're going through, right? In those times, we're going to be trusting the Lord to deliver us out of any evil, right? Um, I think that was it. I think that's all I pretty much had. Let me read this though. I remember I quoted it earlier, but I kind of want to read it. In Sirach 2, verse 1. I know I read verse 4 earlier, but it says, Sirach 2 and 1, "My son, as thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation, set thy heart aright, and constantly endure, and make not haste in time of trouble." Right? So we understand anyways, when you come into this thing, you gotta act in a disciplined manner, right? You gotta operate in wisdom, not operate in haste, right? So this is just a reminder for that. But it says, verse 3, "Cleave unto him and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased in thy last end," or at thy last end. "Whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art brought to a low estate." That's right. So again, you know, our patience will be rewarded, and that's something you gotta, keep in mind, when especially approaching these days, you gotta start preparing your mind for what you're about to go through, and be willing, to pretty much to go through what it is we gotta go through, man, because our faith will be tested, right? But again, don't let the thoughts of, as the scriptures talk about, give not your mind over to heaviness, right? So don't let your thoughts of these evil times overtake you, because we got hope, right? We got Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, you see? And if you believe and if you trust in that, then understand that He's going to deliver you out of any tribulation that you go through, right? That's our hope and that's our trust, what I'm saying? That's where our strength lies, right? Is in our faith in the Lord. While everybody else, is going to be bugging out and tripping, you know, we're going to be, you know, solid as our foundation, right? As that rock. So anyway, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close it out by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai Bashim Racha Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth and rule well. Peace and blessings into the hopeful elect, pushing His word throughout the four corners of the earth in truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Until the next time, I'm gonna say Shalom, Kwam Masha Allah.